Oh yeah, hello. We're doing ignition systems. No, we're doing ignition and starting systems. All right, you guys are going to hear some clicks of my mouse, and you're going to hear, I guess, me pushing spacebar and the arrow key. But stick with me. This is my way of studying. I hope it works for you too. All right, why are high-tension ignition cables frequently routed from the distributors to the spark plugs in flexible metallic conduits? To reduce the effect of the high-frequency electromagnetic waves emanated during operation. When a shower of sparks ignition system is activated and an engine start, a spark plug fires. Let me read that again. When a shower sparks ignition system is activated at an engine start, a spark plug fires only while the retard and advanced breaker points are open. Capacitance after firing in most modern spark plugs is reduced by the use of a built-in resistor in each spark plug. That's my cat. In an aircraft ignition system, one of the functions of the capacitor is to facilitate more rapid collapse of the magnetic field in the primary coil. Let's do that one again. In an aircraft ignition system, one of the functions of the capacitor is to facilitate more rapid collapse of the magnetic field in the primary coil. How many secondary coils are required in a low-tension ignition system on an 18-cylinder engine? 36. I knew that one. Shielding is used on spark plug and ignition wires to prevent interference with the radio reception. My cat, shut up, Tino. Let's do that question again. Shielding is used on spark plug and ignition wires to prevent interference with the radio reception. The purpose of staggered ignition is to compensate for diluted fuel-to-air mixture around exhaust valve. What test instrument could be used to test an ignition harness for suspected leaks? A high-tension lead tester. In reference to shower of sparks ignition system, number 2 is correct. Number 2 is the timed opening of the retard breaker points is designed to prevent engine kickback during start. Regarding the above statements, only number 2 is true. That was that one. Let's read it again. In reference to shower of sparks ignition system, regarding the above statements, which one is true and number 2 is here? The timed opening of the retard breaker points is designed to prevent engine kickback during start. The capacitor type ignition system is used almost universally on turbine engines primarily because of its high voltage and high heat intensity. In a low tension ignition system, each spark plug requires an individual secondary coil. What will be the effect if the spark plugs are gapped too wide? Hard starting. When removing a shielded spark plug, which of the following is most likely to be damaged? Core insulator is most likely to be damaged. How does the ignition system of a gas turbine engine differ from that of a reciprocating engine? A high energy spark is required for ignition. How does the ignition system of a gas turbine engine differ from that of a reciprocating engine? A high energy spark is required for ignition. Needed to run that one back twice. My cat really wants to get in here right now. In a turbine engine DC capacitor discharge ignition system, where are the high voltage pulses formed? In a turbine engine DC capacitor... I said that completely wrong. In a turbine engine DC capacitor discharge ignition system, where are the high voltage pulses formed? At the triggering transformer. Which of the following breaker point characteristics is associated with a faulty capacitor? Coarse-grained. Thermocouples are usually inserted or installed on the hottest cylinder of the engine. Thermocouples are usually inserted or installed on the hottest cylinder of the engine. Capacitance after firing of a spark plug is caused by excessive center electrode erosion. Sharp bends should be avoided in ignition leads primarily because weak points may develop in the insulation through which high tension current can leak. In a high tension ignition system, a primary capacitor of too low a capacity will cause the breaker contacts to burn. One more time. In a high tension ignition system, a primary capacitor of too low a capacity will cause the breaker contacts to burn. Which statement is correct regarding the ignition system of a turbine engine? The system is normally de-energized as soon as the engine starts. In a high tension ignition system, a primary capacitor of too low a capacity will cause the breaker points to burn. Which statement is correct regarding the ignition system of a turbine engine? I don't know why that ran back twice. My bad, y'all. Which statement is correct regarding the ignition system of a turbine engine? The system is normally de-energized as soon as the engine starts. Next question. When does battery current flow through the primary circuit of a battery ignition coil? When the breaker points are closed and the ignition switch is on. In a 4-stroke cycle aircraft engine, when does the ignition event take place? Before the piston reaches TDC on compression stroke. The type of ignition system used on most turbine aircraft engines is capacitor discharge. Ignition check during engine run-up indicates a slow drop in RPM. This is usually caused by incorrect ignition timing or valve adjustment. Which of the following are advantages of dual ignition in aircraft engine? 1, 2, and 3. Again, the question is, which of the following are advantages of dual ignition in aircraft engines? Number 1, gives a more complete and quick combustion of the fuel. 2, provides a backup magneto system. 3, increases output power of the engine. All of these are advantages of dual ignition in aircraft engines. How does high-tension ignition shielding tend to reduce radio interference? Receives and grounds high-frequency waves coming from the magneto and high-tension ignition leads. What are 2 parts of a distributor in an aircraft engine ignition system? The 2 parts that are listed would be block and rotor for that question. What is a result of flashover in a distributor? Conductive carbon trail. What is the relationship between distributor and crankshaft speed of aircraft reciprocating engines? The distributor turns at 1/2 crank speed. Why do turbine engine ignition systems require high energy? To ignite the fuel under conditions of high altitude and low temperatures. One more time. Why do turbine engine ignition systems require high energy? To ignite the fuel under conditions of high altitude and low temperatures. Which of the following are included in a typical turbine engine ignition system? 1, 3, and 6. 2 igniter plugs, 1 exciter unit, 2 high-tension igniter leads. At what RPM is a reciprocating engine ignition switch check made? One more time. At what RPM is a reciprocating engine ignition switch check made? At the lowest possible RPM. Refer to figure 5. Hopefully you have the Prepware app and you can pull the figures up. If not, I'll put it on the screen really quick. Let me give myself some time here to find it and get it on there. With power applied to the bus bar, what switch changes will allow the ignition exciter's test switch to function? I'll give it a second. With power applied to the bus bar, what switch changes will allow the ignition exciter's test switch to function? Engine master switch and ignition switch. Also, on figure 5, the type of system depicted is capable of operating with either battery or external power. One more time. The type of system depicted is capable of operating with either battery or external power. When an external power source is connected to the aircraft, the battery cannot be connected to the bus. When an external power source is connected to the aircraft, according to Figure 5, the battery cannot be connected to the bus. Which malfunctions will allow the igniters to operate when tested but be inoperative during a start attempt? Conductor number 10 will be broken. An ignition relay inoperative. Term 50, term -95. I don't know what that is. I'm learning, guys. I'm doing this because I'm figuring it out. I have no idea what that is. 1 or 3. So those are our two options. Which malfunctions will allow the igniters to operate when tested but be inoperative during a start attempt? Conductor number 10 broken and ignition relay inoperative. Which malfunctions will allow the igniters to operate normally during start but be inoperative when tested? This is all Figure 5. Conductor number 14 will be broken. Conductor number 15. Oh, did I say 15? Conductor number 14 and number 15 will be broken. I don't know what term 119 means. I haven't seen this. This is my first time reading this, so you guys are with me. How is the strength of a Magneto magnet checked? Hold the points open and check the output of the primary coil with an AC ammeter while operating the Magneto at a specified speed. The E-gap angle is usually defined as the number of degrees between the neutral position of the rotating magnet and the position where the contact points open. When a magneto is disassembled, keepers are usually placed across the poles of the rotating magnet to reduce the loss of magnetism. These keepers are usually made of soft iron. The greatest density of flux lines in the magnetic circuit of a rotating magnet-type magneto occurs when the magnet is in what position? Full alignment with the field shoe faces. Magneto breaker point opening relative to the position of the rotating magnet and distributor rotor internal timing can be set most accurately during assembly of the magneto before installation on the engine. I remember doing that. What will be the results of increasing the gap of the breaker points in a magneto? The results, it will advance the spark and decrease the intensity. What is the purpose of a safety gap in submagnetos? To discharge the secondary coil's voltage and an open occurs. What? Let's go back. What is the purpose of a safety gap in some magnetos? To discharge the secondary coil's voltage if an open occurs in the secondary circuit. To discharge the secondary coil's voltage if an open occurs in the secondary circuit. You guys are legit learning with me. When timing a magneto internally, the alignment of the timing marks indicates that the magnets are in the E-gap position. Got it. When internally timing a magneto, the breaker points begin to open when the rotating magnet is a few degrees past the neutral position. Magneto timing drift is caused by erosion of the breaker points and wear of the cam followers. What is the electrical location of the primary capacitor in a high-tension magneto? In parallel with the breaker points. In a high-tension ignition system, the current in the magneto's secondary winding is induced when the primary circuit is interrupted. What is the radial location of the two north poles of a 4-pole rotating magnet in a high-tension magneto? What is the radial location of the two north poles of a 4-pole rotating magnet in a high-tension magneto? 180 degrees apart. Magneto pole shoes are generally made of laminations of high-grade soft iron. One more time. Magneto pole shoes are generally made of laminations of high-grade soft iron. What components make up the magnetic system of a magneto? Rotating magnet, the pole shoe extensions, and the coil core. When will the voltage in the secondary winding of a magneto installed on a normally operating engine be at its highest value? Just prior to spark plug firing. When the switch is off in a battery ignition system, the primary circuit is opened. As an aircraft engine speed is increased, the voltage induced in the primary coil of the magneto also increases. When internally timing a magneto, the breaker points begin to open when the magnetic poles are a few degrees beyond the neutral position. The purpose of a safety gap in a magneto is to prevent the high voltage winding from damage. A defective primary capacitor in a magneto is indicated by burned and pitted breaker points. A magneto ignition switch is connected parallel to the breaker points. The spark is produced in a magneto ignition system when the breaker points are beginning to open. What is the purpose of using an impulse coupling with a magneto? To produce a momentary high rotational speed of the magneto. One more time. I didn't really grasp it. What is the purpose of using an impulse coupling with a magneto? To produce a momentary high rotational speed of the magneto. Aircraft magneto housings are usually ventilated in order to provide cooling and remove corrosive gases produced by normal arcing. Magneto timing drift is caused by erosion of the breaker points and an open P-lead to ground. Alignment of the marks provided for internal timing of a magneto indicates that magneto is in the E-gap position. One more time. Magneto timing drift is caused by erosion of the breaker points and an open P-lead to ground. Alignment of the marks provided for internal timing of a magneto indicates that the magneto is in the E-gap position. Alignment of the marks provided for internal timing of a magneto indicates that the magneto is in the E-gap position. When using a timing light to time a magneto to an aircraft engine, the magneto switch should be placed in the both position. I remember trying to get that light to turn on. What is the difference between a low tension and a high tension engine ignition system? A low tension system uses a transformer coil near the spark plugs to boost voltage, while the high tension system voltage is constant from the magneto to the spark plugs. The amount of voltage generated in any magneto secondary coil is determined by the number of windings and by the rate of collapse of the magnetic field around the primary coil. You know I'm going to go back. What is the difference between a low tension and a high tension engine ignition system? That's the previous question. We're going to answer it anyway. A low tension system uses a transformer coil near the spark plugs to boost voltage, and the high tension system voltage is constant from the magneto to the spark plugs. Got it. The amount of voltage generated in any magneto secondary coil is determined by the number of windings and by the rate of collapse of the magnetic field around the primary coil. Magneto breaker points must be timed to open when the greatest magnetic field stress exists in the magnetic circuit. A certain 9-cylinder radial engine used a non-compensated single-unit dual-type magneto with a 4-pole rotating magnet and separately mounted distributors. Which of the following will have the lowest RPM at any given engine speed? Distributors. I remember that question. I don't remember what the heck it's talking about. Next question. What likely effect would a cracked distributor rotor have on a magneto? A cracked distributor rotor? Ground the secondary circuit through the crack. Ooh, that would suck. One more time. What likely effect would a cracked distributor rotor have on a magneto? Ground the secondary circuit through the crack. If it is found that a shielded ignition system does not adequately reduce ignition noise, it may be necessary to install a filter between the magneto and the magneto switch. If it is found that a shielded ignition system does not adequately reduce ignition noise, it may be necessary to install a filter between the magneto and the magneto switch. When a magneto is operating, what is the probable cause for a shift in internal timing? The cam follower wear and or breaker points wear. So it's wore out. The thing wore out. What should be used to clean grease or carbon tracks from capacitors or coils that are used in magnetos? Acetone. Which of the following obtained during magneto check at 1700 RPM indicates a short, grounded circuit between the right magneto primary and the ignition switch? Which of the following obtained during the magneto check at 1700 RPM indicates a short, grounded circuit between the right magneto primary and the ignition switch? B, both. 1700 RPM, right 0 RPM, left 1700 RPM, off 0 RPM. That's one it's hard to read it the way it's written on here. I don't know. But I'm going to go with both. If an aircraft ignition switch is turned off and the engine continues to run normally, the trouble is probably caused by an open ground lead in the magneto. When the ignition switch of a single reciprocating engine aircraft is turned to the off position, the primary circuits of both magnetos are grounded. When the ignition switch of a single reciprocating engine aircraft is turned to the off position, the primary circuits of both magnetos are grounded. When testing a magneto distributor block for electrical leakage, which of the following pieces of test equipment should be used? High tension harness tester. Which of the following statements regarding magneto switch circuits is not true? In the both position, the right and left magneto circuits are grounded. In order to turn a magneto off, the primary circuit must be, one more time, in order to turn a magneto off, the primary circuit must be grounded. When performing a magneto ground check on an engine, correct operation is indicated by a slight drop in RPM. If new breaker points are installed and a magneto on an engine, it will be necessary to time one more time. If new breaker points are installed in a magneto on an engine, it will be necessary to time the magneto internally and magneto to the engine. When installing a magneto to an engine, the piston in the number 1 cylinder must be prescribed number of degrees before top center on the compression stroke. Oh, I remember doing that. When installing a magneto on an engine, the piston in the number 1 cylinder must be a prescribed number of degrees before top center on the compression stroke. If the ground wire of a magneto is disconnected at the ignition switch, the result will be the engine will not stop running when the ignition switch is turned off. Again, if the ground wire of a magneto is disconnected at the ignition switch, the result will be the engine will not stop running when the ignition switch is turned off. Which of the following are distinct circuits of a high-tension magneto? 1, 2, and 5, you think? 1 is magnetic, 2 primary, and 5 secondary. What is the approximate position of the rotating magnet in a high-tension magneto when the points first close? The approximate position of the rotating magnet in a high-tension magneto when the points first close. Full register. What component of a dual magneto is shared by both ignition systems? Rotating magnet. Yep. What would be the result if a magneto breaker point main spring did not have sufficient tension? Oh my God, I have a video of me popping out. Oh man, okay, I'm gonna definitely include the first time I had a Magneto. It's crazy. It's on my Instagram. It's kind of funny. The point will float or bounce. What would be the result if a Magneto breaker point mainspring did not have sufficient tension? The points will float or bounce. The secondary coil of a magneto is grounded through the primary coil. In the aircraft magneto system, if the P lead is disconnected, the magneto will be on regardless of ignition switch position. The electrical circuit from the spark plug back to the magneto is completed by grounding through the engine structure. The platinum and iridium ground electrodes used on fine wire spark plugs are extremely brittle and can be broken if they are improperly handled or adjusted. Regarding the above statements, only number 1 is true. And that was number 1. The platinum iridium ground electrodes used on fine wire spark plugs are extremely brittle and can be broken if they are improperly handled or adjusted. A spark plug is fouled when its spark grounds without jumping electrodes. A spark plug's heat range is the result of its ability to transfer heat from the firing end of the spark plug to the cylinder head. Defective spark plugs will cause the engine to run rough at all speeds. Generally, when removing a turbine engine igniter plug in order to eliminate the possibility of the technician receiving a lethal shock, the ignition switch is turned off and the igniter lead is disconnected from the plug and the center electrode grounded to the engine after disconnecting the transformer exciter input lead and waiting the prescribed time. Be careful. Great caution should be exercised in handling damaged hermetically sealed turbine engine igniter transformer units because I think it's something radioactive. Some contain radioactive material. Hot spark plugs are generally used in aircraft power plants with comparatively low operating temps. How are most radial engine spark plug wires connected to How are most radial engine spark plug wires connected to the distributor block? By the use of cable piercing screws. If staggered ignition timing is used, the spark plug nearest the exhaust valve will fire first. Igniter plugs used in turbine engines are subjected to high-intensity spark discharges, and yet they have a long service life because they do not require continuous operation. Ignition check during engine run-up indicates excessive RPM drop during operation on the right magneto. The major portion of the RPM loss occurs rapidly after switching to the right magneto position, which is a fast drop. The most likely cause is faulty or fouled spark plugs. Got 30 more, y'all. We can do this. If a spark plug lead becomes grounded, the magneto will not be affected. Spark plug fouling caused by lead deposits occurs most of when cylinder head temperatures are relatively low. Occurs most when cylinder head temperatures are relatively low. That's the answer. You got it. Spark plug heat range is determined by its ability to transfer heat to the cylinder head. Spark plugs are considered worn out when the electrodes have worn away to about 1/2 of their original dimensions. The constrained gap igniter plug used in some gas turbine engines operates at a cooler temperature because the construction is such that the spark occurs beyond the face of the combustion chamber liner. One more time. The constrained gap igniter plug used in some gas turbine engines operates at a cooler temperature because the construction is such that the spark occurs beyond the face of the combustion chamber liner. That was like a tongue twister for me. The numbers appearing on the ignition distributor block indicate the sparking order of the distributor. The spark occurs at the spark plug when the ignition's primary circuit is broken. The spark occurs at the spark plug when the ignition's primary circuit is broken. The term reach, as applied to spark plug design and or type, indicates the linear distance from the shell gasket seat to the end of the threads on the shell skirt. Linear. From the linear. Let's do it again. Reach. This is called reach. The term reach, as applied to spark plug design and or type, indicates the linear distance from the shell gasket seat to the end of the threads on the shell skirt. Reach. Upon inspection of the spark plugs in an aircraft engine, the plugs were found caked with a heavy black soot. This indicates a rich mixture. Nice. Using a coal spark plug in a high compression aircraft engine would probably result in normal operation. Coal spark plug, high compression, normal operation. What will be the result of using too hot a spark plug? Pre-ignition. Be careful. Which of the following could cause damage to the nose ceramic or to the electrode of an aircraft spark plug? Improper gapping procedure. Which of the following statements most accurately describes spark plug heat range? A coal plug is designed so that the insulator tip is reasonably short to hasten the rate of heat transfer from the tip through the spark plug shell to the cylinder head. Which of the following statements most accurately describes spark plug heat range? A coal plug is designed so that the insulator tip is reasonably short to hasten the rate of heat transfer from the tip through the spark plug shell to the cylinder head. Which of the following would be cause for rejection of a spark plug? Insulator tip is cracked. Rejection. Correct. Why are turbine engine igniters less susceptible to fouling than reciprocating engine spark plugs? Less susceptible? The high intensity spark cleans the igniter. Again? Okay. Why are turbine engine igniters less susceptible to fouling than reciprocating engine spark plugs? The high intensity spark cleans the igniter. A clicking sound heard at engine coast down in a pneumatic starter incorporating a sprag clutch ratchet assembly is an indication of the pawls reconnecting and riding on the ratchet gear. I have no idea what this means. A clicking sound heard at engine coast down in a pneumatic starter incorporating a sprag clutch ratchet assembly is an indication of the pawls reconnecting and riding on the ratchet gear. I just need to memorize that one. Airflow to the pneumatic starter from a ground unit is normally prevented from causing starter overspeed during engine start by activation of a flyweight cutout switch. Let's start over. Airflow to the pneumatic starter from a ground unit is normally prevented from causing starter overspeed during engine start by activation of a flyweight cutout switch. Flyweight. Activation of a flyweight. So flyweight. Air turbine starters are generally designed so that reduction gear distress or damage may be detected by inspection of a magnetic chip detector. A safety feature usually employed in direct cranking starters that is used to prevent the starter from reaching burst speed is the spring coupling release. A safety feature usually employed in pneumatic starters that is used if the clutch does not release from the engine drive at the proper time during start is the moving a little too fast. Let me read it again. A safety feature usually employed in pneumatic starters that is used if the clutch does not release from the engine drive at the proper time during start is the drive shaft shear point. Did you get that one right? In a typical starter generator system, under which of the following starting circumstances may it be necessary to use the start-stop button on a hung start? Inspection of pneumatic starters by maintenance technicians usually includes checking the oil level and magnetic drain plug condition. In the event a pneumatic start valve will not operate and the manual override must be used, The starter T-handle must be closed at scheduled starter dropout because the starter will overspeed at a given N2. I'm going to just move on from that one. Got to look it up in your book there. Pneumatic starters are usually designed with what types of airflow impingement systems? Airflow impingement systems, radial inward flow turbine, and axial flow turbine. Let's read it again. Pneumatic starters are usually designed with what types of airflow impingement systems? Radial inward flow turbine and axial flow turbine. Oh, back to figure 5. Hey, let's pop that thing back on the screen. Let me find it. Give me a chance to find it. All right. If wire number 8 is broken or disconnected after starter rotation is initiated and the power lever is advanced, the starting sequence will continue normally. Okay. Figure 5 again. With power applied to the bus bar, what wire supplies standby power to the starter relay contact? Number 4. The primary advantage of pneumatic air turbine starters over comparable electric starters for turbine engines is high power to weight ratio. The purpose of an undercurrent relay in a starter generator system is to disconnect power from the starter generator and ignition when sufficient engine speed is reached. When using an electric starter motor, current usage is highest at the start of motor rotation. When using an electric starter motor, the current flow through it is highest at the start of motor rotation. 132 terms. Did good, y'all. You did good. That was a good job. That's a lot of questions we went through. I'm proud of you. Shout out to the guy that put this quiz up on Quizlet. Appreciate you. Appreciate you so much.